reference CE marking, we're talking about the legal compliance side of it. Under the construction product regulations, we do all have a duty of care responsibility. So CE marking isn't unimportant in that respect. And one of the benefits of the standard BSEN 16034, which we're going to talk about today, is it does open the market up for specifiers and buyers, consumers, to a wider range of more advanced fire curtain products, and we will look at some of those today. So my name's Charles Devenish. I'm the Managing Director of Adexon Fire and Smoke Curtains. A little bit about our credentials, if you don't already know us. We've been going since 2005, worked on some prestigious and large projects, including some over £1 million. We've worked with some of the well-known clients, such as Crown Estates, Goldman Sachs, etc. Balfour Beatty. We're REBA accredited CPD providers, so we're big advocates of continuous professional development and education. We believe in raising awareness, raises standards, means safer built environment. And we've recently been asked to join some of the national committees with BSI, so help to contribute towards making standards better and safer. So we're on FSH 25, which looks after BS 8524, and we're on B5381, which contributes towards BSEN 16034, and we've just been added to FSH 22, which looks after, I think it's ISO 21524, a standard to do with the horizontal fire curtains. Our design that we came up with some time ago has been shortlisted for awards, been described as, not my words, but genius, as it does resolve some of the more common headaches with fire curtains. So our mission and vision, we are seeking to foster industry-wide innovation and improve performance and reliability, whilst ensuring third-party certification and legal compliance are the norm. And you might say our journey, our vision is to make the UK the global leader in active fire and smoke curtains through quality, innovation, raising performance expectations and continually improving. This is our charter, just gives you a bit of an idea of what guides us day to day. So legal, certified and better. So products that are covered by a harmonised standard are legally required to be CE marked. All of our vertical fire curtains, which are covered by BSEN 16034, are CE marked. On that, some people might say there's not many prosecutions under the CPR, but it's better to be on the right side of it. And then certified, valid third-party certification for life safety products is mandatory. For best practice, it's long been espoused in the industry, valid third-party certification. Most people would advocate for that. We liken it, if you look at a car analogy, you might have you might look at insurance and an MOT. Valid third-party certification is akin to valid MOT and insurance. The factory production control that goes into it, the independent auditing of processes and design and manufacturing, etc., all ensures that the product arriving on site is the same as that was tested maybe months or years ago. And then better, it really ties in with our desire to innovate and bring better products to market. So if you have a look on our website or come and see us on our stand, you'll see our guide design, which overcomes the 3 most common headaches with fire curtains. It is tangibly better, and we have a development roadmap which we are working towards. We have a short 80-second video on the website for anyone that wants to have a look at that. So what are fire curtains? The most common configuration of fire curtain is the vertical, which is somebody new to the industry. I would describe it as a modern form of a roller shutter. So essentially 2 guides, one on either side of the opening, a head box which contains the barrel assembly, and the fabric wraps around that. On a fire alarm, that will deploy to provide compartmentation, and it's also used for protecting means of escape, fire escape routes. The other 2 configurations on the left and in the middle. On the left is the concertina curtain, also known as the accordion, because of the way it folds up the fabric. So this is a design that doesn't have any guides. So when it's up in the ceiling, out of sight, it is completely unobstructive. We've got a couple of these going in at LFC at the moment where they're basically, because of footfall on match days, they don't want to have any guide rails. And then the middle configuration, the horizontal one, enables compartmentation between floors, for example, where there's open atria. So Adexon Fire and Smoke, we're the leading voice in the UK fire market, advocating for compliance with more demanding European standards and tests in lieu of older British standards and tests. An example of this is the proposed transition to the European fire test, BSCN 1634 Part 1. It's more rigorous than the British equivalent, BS 476. The use of the plate thermometer in the European fire tests means the product is being tested as exposed to up to 30% more thermal exposure than in a BS 476. And there's just a little fact: if you had a fire strategy that was relying on a fire curtain with an E60 rating, which, if you're familiar with the European classifications, is the integrity, 60 minutes, a fire curtain tested to BS 476, which is permitted in BS 8524, may be rated as 60 minutes integrity, yet it might only achieve 45 minutes E45 in a European fire test. And just on the legal compliance side, there's an inherent and accumulating legacy risk to following advice to disregard BS EN 16034 for any vertical fire curtains, and would suggest that it's a risk that those advising are unlikely to indemnify you against. It is a decision that we each have to make on a day-to-day basis. If there was a fire, would insurers pay out where products weren't compliant with the October 2018 ruling of the group GNB CPR SGO6, which is the steering group set up to determine, amongst other things, the applicability of BSCN 16034 to fire curtains. And that was challenged by some in this country, and they determined after consideration that it does cover vertical fire curtains. So some key points around this subject is the construction product regulations are still a legal requirement in the UK and will be for the foreseeable future. One of the criteria is if a product is covered by a harmonised standard, it is a legal requirement of the CPR to CE mark the product to that harmonised standard. The steering group 6 we just mentioned determined in 2018 that BSCN 16034 does cover fire curtains, and BSCN 16034 becoming harmonised on the 1st November 18 and covering fire curtains meant it's a legal requirement to CE mark all vertical fire curtains to it from that date. It also required BS 8524 to be withdrawn for vertical fire curtains, formally withdrawn as a conflicting national standard. Hasn't yet been formally withdrawn. We've spoken to BSI about this recently, and we've basically pointed out the text in the harmonised standard, and we've just said if BS 8524 Part 1 isn't a conflicting standard with BSCN 16034, could we see an example of two other standards that are as similar as each other and are deemed as conflicting to show us the difference. So we've just touched on this legal responsibility. It's since 1603 became harmonised, all vertical fire curtains must be CE marked to it. One of the benefits of this is, we can look at CE marking as a removal of barrier to entry. It does provide a level of constancy and consistency. Indeed, the certificates that you'll get for CE mark, and if you get a CE mark certificate from a notified body, it's called a certificate of constancy of performance. And what it has done for us is it's opened up the market to a wider range of products. Some of them suggest amongst ourselves with better design features, which then enables a wider adoption of the product and a growth in the market. And we would just say is everyone would benefit if manufacturers were encouraged to accept the changes and invest to bring their products up to speed with the current regulations and standards. And we have there's just a reference there, but you can read it on the white paper. We've got an article around 8524, a conflicting national standard that should be formally withdrawn, and the improvements it needed. As we're now on the national committee for that, we will be able to contribute to that if it does indeed go through a revision. Third-party certification, as already touched on, it's a little bit like the difference between having insurance and an MOT on a car or not. It is misleading to say that BS 8524 Part 1 has valid third-party certification. It doesn't. IFC notified manufacturers in June 2022 that they would no longer support it and would be withdrawing support, and provided a 12-month notification period, which expired on the 9th of June 2023 this year. So there is currently no valid third-party certification supported by a notified body for BS 8524 Part 1. Valid third-party certification is a safety-first principle. As I say, it's been widely espoused for many, many years. And we don't feel that advice should be changed to suit maybe the status of a single standard. And it's a significant risk mitigator for duty holders. Without third-party certification, there's a risk on you as a specifier, as a buyer, to do a whole load of checks. You might say that the product arriving on site is that same as what was tested. And we'd say advocating for treating third-party certification as optional is a dangerous precedent. As leaders in the industry, we should be encouraging best practice, such as investment in third-party certification and testing. And we've got you can watch Paul Morell. We did a talk just after him at the Architects Journal Fire Safety Design Conference. His talk was Testing for a Safety Future, independent review of the construction products testing regime. And he goes into a lot of detail of what's involved in third-party testing and certification, and there's 5 levels. He goes on and he speaks about products that are essentially life safety should be subject to the highest level of scrutiny, which includes ongoing factory production control and auditing. So just how robust is BS 8524? If you were here yesterday, we just touched on this. It came out in 2013. It was a move forward for the industry. It was the first dedicated product standard to fire curtains. To say it's robust is, 10 years ago, as I say, it was a move forward. But we have seen some of the poorest products on the market actually tested and certified historically to it. So it's definitely got scope for improvement. And, it's not something you can just hang your hat on per se. You do need to actually check the product you're buying yourself. We've got a case in point there where there's a it's a £1 billion office development in London. And you've got one of the largest facilities management companies in the world that are looking after it on behalf of the client. And they're just so frustrated with their BS 8524 curtains that they're asking us to rip them out. And that's about 3 years after they're fitted. It's going to cost over 6 figures to replace them. So it's, you need to do your due diligence on the design of the curtain. So cycle test before a fire test is an advantage. Carrying out the cycle test prior to the fire test has the potential to provide the assurances that a fire curtain tested each week for several years will still perform in a fire. Unfortunately, the most common tearing and problems that we experience with fire curtains that we get reported on a day-to-day pretty much basis, where we're called out to, are some of these that you see in the images here. So tearing at the sides, retention poppers becoming torn out and going missing altogether. These aren't actually part of that test. So this element of failure, which is relatively frequent, isn't actually tested. So we would say that is something that needs to be taken into account for that to be really of greater significance. Another aspect of some of the older designs that you'll see on the market are cold smoke seals. These are used in fire doors. It's usually a polypropylene filament with a melting temperature of 170 degrees C and a auto ignition temperature of 200 degrees C. We'll see on the next slide the heat curve. I'll just go to it. This is when there's a fire resistance test. This is the heat curve, which is from 1363. What we can see with those cold smoke seals, that within a minute maybe of the fire test, they will have caught fire and have gone. And this could be a product that's meant to be rated up to 2 hours. You won't be able to probably see it from there, but you can see in the table that after 5 minutes, the temperature is about 576. So if you just go back to the cold smoke seal, that will melt at 170 typically if it's a polypropylene filament, and it'll auto ignite at 200. The reason why cold smoke seals were designed for use in fire doors, where they're actually also used in conjunction with a incandescent strip, the reason on an incandescent strip, that will activate at 180 degrees C, providing pretty much contiguous smoke protection on a fire door. We can't use a incandescent strip on a fire curtain due to it potentially activating early and preventing deployment of the curtain. These images just show you why those problems happen. So in the image on the left, you can see a typical fire curtain old design. We used to use this ourselves 5 years ago. So the method of retaining the fabric in the guide is a nut and a bolt or a popper through the fabric. The trouble there is twofold. You've got a penetration of the fabric, and you've also got a point load. And over time, we see this frequently leading to failure. Also, the traveling metal fastener, this metal popper or the nut and the bolt, can jam in the guides. And again, this is a frequent cause of call-outs. Then we've got the other arrow there just pointing to the cold smoke seals, showing they don't last when they're exposed to fire temperatures. And the solution to this is what we've come up with, as I say, some years ago now. We call it the new design, but it's some years in the making now. It's third-party tested and certified and CE-marked. So we've got a steel pole in the guide. This basically enables seamless travel for the fabric. It's also continuous fabric retention, so there's no gaps at the side. And we've got no penetration of fabric, and there's no point loading. What we've also decided to do as well, in the absence as yet of a hot smoke test, is we've decided to use the fire-resistant components for the actual smoke sealing. And again, this is tested and certified. So provides, as I say, it's been shortlisted for awards, been described as genius by people that are familiar with the headaches they get with fire curtains. And it's basically a 4-in-1 solution, so no rips and tears in the fabric, no jamming and snagging in the guides, no gaps and billowing at the edges, and fire-resistant components for smoke sealing. And we've not protected this design. We'd encourage other manufacturers to imitate it. What we believe is if there's a better performing product in the marketplace, then more people will use fire curtains more readily. They're less likely to use them as a product of last resort, which we get told at the moment people do. People try and design them out because they have problems. You know, the UK market at the moment might be 30 million. If people start, they're a brilliant product, the concept of fire curtains. If people use them more frequently and more readily, that market could grow to 100 million. And that would be a winner, obviously, for all manufacturers. It'd be a winner for the consumer with a safer, more reliable product. Be a winner for specifiers and for facilities management. Hot motor test is something that's brought up with us occasionally. And this is in BS 8524, and it allows the fire curtain to be operated when the temperature at 400 degrees C. We would strongly advocate not operating a fire curtain when the temperature's at 400 degrees C in probably over 90% of applications. We all know that the fire services don't even do extreme training over 200 degrees C. There would be a very small percentage of applications where this might have merit, but on the balance of probability, we'd say it should be designed, a fire curtain, unless there's significant additional controls, should be designed so it doesn't work at elevated temperatures. If you opened a fire curtain and the temperature is 400 degrees C anywhere near you, you're not only in danger your own life, but you'd endanger the building. So is BS 8524 Part 1 in transition? We'd say it's misleading to say that it's currently in transition phase with a number of UCAS-approved notified bodies in the process of seeking final approval from UCAS for a new scheme. We'd just say that that's premature. To imply an imminence would be misleading. BS 8524 Part 1 2013 has gone and will not be back. If it does come back, it will be a considerably different standard. As I say, you can read, we've got an article on the white paper with about 8 pages of suggestions for improvements in the standard. We're advocates. If it's going to stay around, let's make it better, but it'll be considerably different. So something that's tested to the old 2013 standard won't necessarily pass the new standard. And notified bodies can't commence until a new BS 8524 Part 1 is published. If you speak to BSI, they'd say don't quote anything out of the draft that's out for public consultation or out of any draft standards. You have to wait until it's published. As we've said, it might not be. If it is deemed as a conflicting national standard, it'll be formally withdrawn for vertical fire curtains. And yeah, to imply an imminence is misleading. It could be months or years away. With regards to using it currently, we'd say there's insufficient performance or testing grounds to argue the continued use of it while it doesn't have valid third-party certification. Back to that car analogy, would you drive a car without insurance and without MOT because it had adaptive cruise control or because it had bigger alloys? You wouldn't. It doesn't have valid third-party certification. It doesn't offer a route to legal compliance, and it is a conflicting national standard. This is just basically reinforcing that BS 8524 Part 1 fire curtain should not be used if we go by long-held principles that put life safety and risk-averse thinking ahead of commercial interest. You know, you can look at any content going back over the last 10 years, and third-party certifications repeatedly advocated for life safety products, including in our own marketplace, fire curtains. So, scope and definitions of 16034. To acknowledge that 16034 applies to vertical fire curtains is to acknowledge that the 8524 should be formally withdrawn, and vertical fire curtains do account for 90% of the market by volume, and that's perhaps why I've seen some resistance to that and some attempts to minimize the application of 16034. We've got a white paper recently out on the website, and you can read all about it. It's a 40-minute read, but it goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to have time to go through all of these slides now, but what you'll see by reading it is that the standard does apply to all vertical fire curtains if you look at the definitions as well as the scope. You know, to say that 16034 only applies to fire curtains when used as a door to allow personal access to retail premises is not correct. It's also contrary to the ruling we've already touched on. And we also look, if you look at the hierarchy of authority in the industry, you know, you've got the accreditation bodies at the top of the tree, and then you've got like the notified bodies such as Effectus and A+, and those notified bodies have produced schemes for 16034 for all vertical fire curtains, so they've aligned themselves with the ruling. And we've even, you know, we've seen people that got BS 8524 have their own declaration of performance for C marking to 16034. Definitions in section 3 of 16034 include a door set defined as a range of items you can see there, including an operable fabric curtain, a rolling or folding curtain, and then further opens up an operable fabric curtain defined as a door set with a leaf constructed from a woven material. As you can see, it's very much a description that fits a fire curtain. And it also goes on to speak about in the reach of persons, and nowhere in the definitions or the scope is the application restricted to retail premises, which is one of the common things that's raised to minimize its application. With regards to it being a conflicting national standard, I've already really touched on this. 16034 does cover vertical fire curtains, and as I say, this is on the draft public for consultation on BS 8524 that it should be formally withdrawn for vertical fire curtains. The harmonised standard forward refers to this requirement, which is part of the construction product regulations. The European standard should be given the status of national standard, and conflicting national standards shall be withdrawn by October 19. So just a bit about how it works. So C marking to 16034 is undertaken in conjunction with 13241. BSCN 13241 uses the terms and definitions in another standard. So there's a lot of numbers and standards here. And this states for the purpose of this standard, the term door being described is being used to describe gates and shutters as well as doors. We've already seen the definition of doors in 16034. And what we'll often, or how we started actually with what is a fire curtain is, you know, a roller shutter and a fire curtain, a vertical fire curtain, for the intents and purposes of smoke and fire testing, are, you know, you'd be hard pressed to make some differences. They both comprise of a pair of guide rails, a head box with a barrel assembly and a tubular motor, and essentially a fire resistant curtain, whether it's made out of solid metal lath or woven stainless steel. There's no material difference, is what we're saying, between a fire shutter and a fire curtain in terms of safety or fire and smoke requirements. We've touched on this, that 16034 has been challenged unsuccessfully. You know, one of the arguments could be, well, you know, let's hear what people say as to minimising it, but this has already actually taken place back in 2018. It was reviewed, just to be fair, everyone should have a voice, and the determination was that the standard does apply, and therefore, you know, the C marking requirements do come in. We hear about speculation about future standards and changes that are underway. Our simple take on that is that current standards and current regulations is what we should all adhere to as an industry. You know, speculating about the future, if we do that and we don't go by what is there today, then there is no standard and there is no regulation. You know, it tends to be, well, it would be every man for themselves, which wouldn't be helpful for fire safety. Just touch on the machinery directive. The manufacturers of curtains must meet the requirements of the supply machinery safety regulations. This is demonstrated by either a self-declared declaration of performance, a DOP, which you might be familiar with for CE marking, or better is to have a third-party notified body issue a certification of constitutive performance, CE marking. CE marking to the Machinery Directive does not relinquish the manufacturer's legal responsibility under construction law, i.e. the construction product regulations, to CE mark products to a harmonized standard, where a harmonized standard covers the product. We've seen some people say, with CE marking to the Machinery Directive, that is not sufficient to comply with the requirements of the CPR. Self-declaration CE mark does leave a lot on the consumer to check and expose them to the risks of trusting a manufacturer. Essentially, we're all, as manufacturers, we're commercially driven, so it's always safer to have that third party, notified body, issue a certificate of constitutive performance. After leaving the European Union, the CPR was enshrined in UK law with the Construction Product Amendment, EU Exit Regulations 2020. Harmonised standards such as BSEN 16034 became designated standards, and the legal requirements of CE mark, which also includes UK CA mark currently, under the CPR remains in place after January 2021. There was a potential watershed then, but that's been extended. And we may even see, some people would say that the UK CA mark might actually go away altogether eventually. At the moment, it's on track to come into play for construction products in 2025. So fire curtains that are on the UK market are therefore required to carry either a CE mark or a UK CA mark. This is vertical fire curtains to BSEN 16034. We see some claims around BS 8524, such as the ASFP are helping find a new notified body. We wouldn't disagree with that. 2 are already creating their 8524 schemes. We'd just say that's premature to say when we know that 8524 is undergoing revision, hasn't been finalised, may never reach a revision, may be withdrawn. So we'd say it's premature to say that they're creating a scheme. It's unlikely a notified body would invest a lot of money in a scheme that could be subject to change, and it's certainly, obviously, UCAS wouldn't be able to approve that. We sometimes see this claim, date of our certificate is 2026. That is misleading if it's implying valid third-party certification, which probably an average architect specifier might read that to mean. IFC have made it clear that they have withdrawn from supporting BS 8524 certification, and it expired on the 9th of June 2023. So there is no valid third-party certification, and that statement really is could give the wrong impression. We hear claims about 9001 for manufacturing. Well, probably most exhibitors in this hall have ISO 9001 for manufacturing. Doesn't mean that they can safely manufacture a fire curtain. Number of regulatory bodies deem our approach okay. This could be a misuse of the word regulatory. Regulations applies to law and legislation. We're not aware of any regulatory bodies that have approved a substitute, if you like, for third-party certification. More than happy to look at it if there are, but it could just be an inadvertent misuse of the word. So just won't be able to go through all of these. 9999 and 9991 referring to 8524, including revisions under consideration. The first point is the existing 9999 refers to it. It was published in 2017. Since 2017, BSEN 16034 has become harmonised, which makes it out of date in that respect, and also BS 8524 has lost its third-party certification. And as already touched on, BSI would warn strongly against referring to a revision that is under review before it's published. We saw in the overarching statements by Richard Millett, the KC to the Grenfell inquiry, he referred to dangerously outdated guidance, and 9999 would be an example of that as it currently sits. So BSI state compliance with British standard cannot confer immunity from legal obligations, which we've just stated about the CE marking is a legal requirement under the CPR. One of the benefits of European tests compared to British tests is a series of direct field of application rules explain how test results can be used. So XAP's extended applications are rigid and rules-based and use calculation methods and expert judgments already agreed on and written down in a SEN standard. This contrasts with under BS 476 and the Passive Fire Protection Forum's Code of Practice, where There can be a technical assessment done, which can tend to be subjective. And anyone that knows construction will know, asking somebody to do an assessment on site, in the heat of the moment, no pun intended, but you might get a very different outcome or a different ruling than somebody that's making a assessment on suitability, away from that pressure situation. And that XAP system, we say, is a night and day difference in the fire safety between the old British standard and the current European standard system. So in summary, notified bodies providing third-party certified C marking to BSCN 1603 for all vertical fire curtains is evidence that it applies to that product. They wouldn't be able to produce a scheme if it didn't apply. And the likes of UCAS accrediting those notified bodies, they couldn't approve them again if it wasn't applicable. So you've got the highest levels of authority approving that. And that's our summary for that. And if you want a free REBA CPD, come over and see us or scan the QR code there. You can follow us on LinkedIn or receive our Technical Perspective Fire Safety Insights monthly newsletter. Thanks very much for watching and see you around.